Hello, people of the Feasting Tubes. I'm Mr. Spork, and these are Mr. Spork's Hands. We're coming up on the third in the trilogy of holiday feasts. You've got your very traditional Thanksgiving over here in North America. That's usually a turkey. You've got your Christmas, which is roast beef or prime rib, maybe. Sometimes you might go a little wonky and try another turkey or a goose. And then you've got the illegitimate stepchild in that trilogy of feasts. You've got New Year's. Now, a lot of people I know are going to choose to allow the good folks in the food and beverage service industry to feed and booze them that night. But if you're like me, it's a good excuse to have a third feast in the holiday season and kick off the new year the right way. And for my house, that was always ham. Even now, even though I've gone a little bit more vegetarian as I get older, I still go ahead and do a big, huge festive ham for New Year's. I think simply because ham can also be a main dish, but it can also be kind of finger food. You can slice it thin and wrap it around stuff and put it on a cocktail toothpick. There's all kinds of interesting things you can do for that New Year's feasting, which isn't always a sit-down dinner, and I think ham is the answer. Now, what we get over here in North America, very commonly available to us, is one of these. This is a ham shank. This one is smoked and fully cooked. This beautiful example came from the good people over in Quebec. But what folks will do, sometimes you'll get a gammon leg, an uncooked hind quarter. I'll show you what to do if you've got one of those, but for right now, let's assume that you've got one of these smoked, fully cooked hams. We're not really going to need to re-cook it, but we do want to heat it through, and we want to do something interesting on the outside. I think, again, New Year's is where you can be a little bit more creative, a little bit more wild, a little less traditional. So I'm going to do what I'm calling, at least until I think of a better name, maybe by the end of the video I will, I'm going to call this my Firecracker Pineapple Ham. And this is how I do it. First, I've got my trusty old roaster over here. It's a big, hefty cast iron roaster, and I need to prop this ham up while it's cooking. I don't want it down in any liquid because it goes a little mushy if you do that. Certainly I could get a rack that fits in there, but you know, if you've got a rib of celery and a big, huge Horkin carrot, maybe one that's a little bit tougher than you'd regularly like to eat. Those make a perfectly good little trivet right there. It'll add some flavor into the water and the stock that's going to render out from the pork. We're going to drain the fat off and make that into a sauce. So I take this beautiful smoked beast, put it this way up. We're going to put a little bit of water down in the bottom as I go into the pan, or excuse me, into the oven, I should say. But I want to do something fun on the outside here. To do that, I'm going to actually use two different, what I'd call glazes. There's going to be a cooking glaze, which is a little less sweet, and I'm going to put that on for the full duration. I'm going to put this into a really low oven, probably 250 Fahrenheit, whatever that works out to, 130 Celsius, I think. But I'm going to put it in there for a very low, slow, long, in effect, reheat, since this is fully cooked. The idea is that you want flavors to penetrate in, but not all the way to the center of the ham. So to make that kind of glaze, that cooking glaze, if you will, I'm going to start with the tops of my celery there. I'm going to take a full onion, throw that in there. I've got probably, what is this? That's 20 grams worth of garlic in there. And I've got the firecracker part. Now, I've made this with habaneros before, but for whatever reason, we didn't have any habaneros in the grocery store last time I went before all the stores closed for the holidays. So this is Thai chilies. They work fine too. Something pretty pungent, because that long, slow cooking is going to really mellow out that heat. So don't be afraid of going crazy, a little bit crazy, on the chili front. So I've got 6 of those in there with their seeds. Now, here is the pineapple part. I usually make this with fresh pineapple, carve one down myself. But I want to prove to folks in the middle of the continent, if a pineapple isn't available or it's too expensive, whatever, you can absolutely do this with a tin of pineapple. You do want the pineapple and the juice together. Now, to start, I'm not going to use the pineapple itself. I'm just going to put in some of the juice here. I'm going to say that is probably, oh, that's probably a good half cup worth of the juice. We'll use the rest of this later on in the process for the finishing glaze, but you don't want too much sugar at the start because that would ultimately burn over that long, slow cook. So that's saved for later. And now here is the fun part. I have done this with all kinds of different boozes. I've used whiskey, I've used tequila, I've used port. The port was absolutely delicious, but quite frankly, it looked horrible. It was one of the worst colors I've ever had on a ham. So I wouldn't recommend that if you're going to show it to anybody. If you just want to taste it, it was good. But the de facto standard for this kind of thing is I got a little bit of rum here. So I'm just going to take a little bit of light rum, and it's probably about the same volume, about a half a cup of that rum goes in there. And now we're going to have to get a little bit of spice action. Now, it is still cold outside, and people are still coming off of the holiday season, so I'm going to go with some Christmas flavors. There's a little bit of white peppercorn there. I got just a couple cloves, about 3 cloves in there, a little tiny bit of cinnamon. Let's call that a teaspoon of cinnamon. And if I can find my rasp, I'm going to go ahead and get my nutmeg out. And I'm going to go straight in with about a quarter of a nutmeg here. I love these microplane graters. I used to sell these microplane graters a long, long time ago in a shop. So yeah, that's about a quarter's worth. The thing with nutmeg, I know this from years of being in the trade. Nutmeg loses its oomph literally within 24 hours of grinding. Do not use pre-ground nutmeg. It's just, there's just nothing left to it, really. While there might be some flavor, the whole width and breadth of the flavors that nutmeg can offer are just gone. The volatile oils are gone in a hurry. So always grind your nutmeg fresh. Again, these little microplane graters or whatever brand name you find locally do a great job. That went straight into the food processor. So now I just want to grind down these harder spices. If you wanted to go star anise, if you wanted to go fennel, just any kind of Christmassy sort of flavor you want. We're going to get some more Christmas in it a little bit later on. But for now, I just want to get these spices grinded. Oh, I should probably put in a little bit of salt. I'm going to go, since this ham is kind of pre-salted in the cooking process, I'm not going to go too crazy on the salt. But let's do, what is that? That's a half a teaspoon of salt. Grind this down so those spices go into the mix. Now I just want to blend all of this down into kind of a paste. And now I know from experience, trust me on this, if I open this right now, I'm going to get a nose full and I won't be able to stop coughing. So don't do that. Let it just sit there and chill for a little bit. I want to take my knife and just do some scores across the ham. Sometimes there's a bigger fat cap. Sometimes there's a smaller fat cap. If you happen to have a skin-on, uncooked gammon leg or hindquarter leg, then you're probably going to need to pull that rough skin off. Now, don't throw it away. There's all sorts of things you can do with it. You can make it into cracklings and such. But I just want to give the spice and the seasoning a little bit of a place to come in. I'm only going about, what is that, a 1/4 inch thick, if that. You just want to give it, especially on that fat cap. It's going to vary based on your cut of meat. I've done this with other cuts or front cuts of the pork that have a much thicker fat cap, and in that case I'm going to score the fat a little bit deeper. It is absolutely delicious, but this is just what I had today. If you're saying to yourself, hey, I can't afford to get a big huge hunk of ham like this, I'm telling you, you probably can't afford not to, because this stuff, this time of year, you can get this for 99 cents a pound, bone in. Do not pay $7, $8 a pound for the spiral sliced ham. You're paying for prep there, and while that is lovely and delicious and it's convenient and such, you can do this yourself. You can work a knife. You can make an interesting, see, even the cat's saying, don't buy one of those. She just wants one of these cheap cams that you can turn into something absolutely as delicious yourself. So now that that's had a little chance to calm down, I'm going to take this blend. As you can see, we've got kind of a slurry, if you will. And that's going to go over the top. Again, this is the cooking stage. It will get a sweeter dose with the rest of that pineapple, some other things here in a little bit. But I'm going to start here. And, you know, I've got asbestos hands. If you were working with chilies and you're sensitive to them, you may want to get some gloves on for this. But that, don't worry, this isn't going to go to waste either, because, again, we're going to make the, I'll prove it to you. I'm going to make the rest of the glaze with this pineapple here in a little bit. So that goes in there. I'm going to cover that pan with foil. And if you're like me, around here, the foil is never the right size. So all I'm going to do is take 2 sides of foil and bridge the gap nice and tight to make a shield. I want to keep all that moisture in. Let me get this into the oven again. I'm going to go about 250, maybe 275, and it's going to be in there based on the weight of the ham. I'll tell you how long after the fact, but I'm going to guess that this is going to be about an hour, hour and a half before we bring it out and do the second layer of glaze. I'll show you that in just a second. Okay, so what are you going to do if you have a big, completely uncooked pork shank? Well, that's when you have to go find the biggest pot in your kitchen, and you're going to submerge it in water, put it on the stovetop, bring it up to a low simmer. We're talking a very low simmer, not a rolling boil. Throw in a few aromatics, carrot, celery, onion. Throw in a few spices if you feel like, whether you want fennel seeds or star anise or mustard seeds or peppercorns, or like we were doing earlier, a cinnamon stick and cloves, that sort of thing. And you're going to low simmer it probably a good hour and a half, 2 hours for, let's say, a 6-pound, 8-pound piece of meat. The idea is that you're not cooking it completely through, but you're cooking it mostly through. And curiously enough, the bone that is part of that shank will help conduct the heat and get it cooked in the center. So basically you poach it. Also, if you get one that still has the skin on, poaching it first makes it much easier to peel that skin off. But again, leave a good bit of that fat cap on underneath the skin. Do something else, make cracklings out of the skin separately. I know my cats would eat every last bit of cracklings that I drop on the floor. But leave a good healthy fat cap on the ham after you've poached it for a couple hours to get to the stage we were at when I started earlier with that pre-cooked smoked shank. Okay, here we are about 2 hours later in my particular case. Again, it's going to be down to the weight of the ham that you're doing, but here is the goodness. Take that foil cover off that was holding in the moisture. You can see we're not quite done yet, but the steam has kept everything moist. The best way to tell if you're ready to go to stage 2 is to do an internal temp. I'm at about 135, 136 internal temp there. Out on the edge, it's almost 160, so this is almost done, but we're going to get some of those beautiful crispy bits. So the second glaze, the final glaze, if you will, I've got that pineapple from before. It was a tin of pineapple. I think, what is that, about 12 ounces of pineapple, but that's juiced together. So I'm looking at it. It looks like it's about a cup worth of pineapple. To that, I'm going to add about a half a cup of brown sugar. And that's pretty much it, because we've got all the spice we need in here. Let me just whiz this down. And there is the sweet deliciousness that is pineapple and sugar. This will become our final glaze, and this is going to caramelize up, make it into one of those beautiful, crispy, delicious little barks on the outside. Well, I don't know if I'd call it bark because we're not smoking here, but it will be fabulous. But you see, with all the sugar that's in the pineapple and the sugar we added, we don't want this to go on for the whole duration of the bake, because that would be a little bit too brown, a little bit too delicious, I think. So put this on. We're going to go back into a slightly hotter oven now, probably going to go up to around 350, maybe 3 1/4 if you've got the time, but 350. I wouldn't go as high as 375. That's a little too much. But this pineapple puree is going to blend with the sugar. Also, I should tell you that over the 2 hours while this was doing its first part of the bake, I went through about every, I don't know, half hour or so, grabbed a spoon. I swear I didn't take any of the little crispy bits off the end to test, but I took a spoon and I basted with some of these delicious juices that you see that have accumulated in the bottom, that have rendered off the ham and had made this into just something amazing. Wait until you see the finished product. But that's all there is to the second half. The second half, hotter oven and no foil cover this time. I'll come back and show you in another maybe 30 minutes to an hour. So you probably noticed that I had some of the pineapple and sugar mix left over when I glazed. I got about, oh, I don't know, that's about half a cup or so. That's on purpose. What I'm going to do is take all those beautiful juices from the ham cooking, I'm going to strain them off. I'm going to defat them, whether you do it by using one of those fancy defatting gizmos, or like I do, I set it out on the porch for about half an hour in this temperature. The fat will congeal on the top. It's really easy to pull that off. So I'm going to defat that. I'm going to cook that down. And then after the cooking, I'm going to add some of this for a little bit of fresh pineapple brightness and a little bit more sweetness. Believe me, it's going to be one of those amazing sauces that you never really have to make because the ham's doing all the work for you in there. But do save a little of the fresh, uncooked pineapple sugar mix to brighten that up a bit. Oh, and don't forget to pour yourself a glass of port while you wait. And here we are. After about 45 minutes on heat, I went ahead and turned the oven off and just kept the door closed, let it coast on down to its finished temperature. If you couldn't tell by looking at it, you can certainly tell by the big chunk that I've already been slicing off and eating that this is absolutely delicious. It smells great in here. A little bit of the Caribbean, a little bit of the Christmas. It's all kind of muddled together, but it is absolutely fabulous. And that little tiny bright, sharp pop of glaze on the outside just goes perfectly well with the ham. I do think that you could use this any way you can possibly imagine. You can slice it thin or thick for an entree, making that sauce out of the drippings. As you can see, the carrots did their job and kept it up out of the pan. Drain that off, defat it, make the sauce with the pineapple as I mentioned earlier. Or you could slice it thin and make it into sandwiches, big sandwiches, little sandwiches. Depends on how many people you're feeding. You can incorporate it into any number of appetizers for a holiday party. One of my favorites is to take a big plate of deviled eggs and take a little bit of this, shred it, and put just a tiny little bop of each on top of each egg with a little bit of deviled ham. Deviled eggs makes perfect sense to me, and there's never any of them left when I do that. So there you go, a quick and easy way to make a big, huge, cheap cut of meat into something truly spectacular, something that you'd never be able to buy. You can only do it yourself with your own hands, and that, I think, is the way to cook. Do something interesting and creative in your own kitchen. Matter of fact, tell me how this works out for you if you try it. Leave me a comment down below in the comment section. Tell me what you did to make it your own. Did you use a different fruit, a different booze, whatever works for you, whatever didn't work for you, I want to hear about it. As always, I do appreciate you guys liking and thumbs upping and book space tweety snapping and all that other social media stuff. Please do subscribe if you haven't already, because that's what lets me keep doing this for you, as well as watching the ad that plays after this. They throw a few pennies my way, and that keeps me in ham and carrots, which lets me keep making recipes for you guys. I want to say that I do appreciate you, all of you, so much for being around for me in 2017. It's been a fun and exciting year. Got more of the same coming. So until next year, I am Mr. Spork. These are Mr. Spork's hands, and now it's time to go make some sandwiches out of this gorgeous ham. We'll see you next year. Cheers.